Our next session is a continuation of one of our most popular from yesterday. It brings together two very important perspectives on Bitcoin. Adam Back is a legendary cryptographer, the inventor of Hashcash, and the co-founder and CEO of Blockstream. His work is part of the very foundation on which Bitcoin is built. Joining him is Professor Aurelien Portuese, our very own, who, of course, is a leading voice on law, economics, and innovation policy. Please welcome them both on stage.
Adam, we wanted to do a follow-up Fireside chat from yesterday because there's so much to discuss, and we're very honored to have you on the side of the Atlantic. So we've seen yesterday there was a lot of discussion about treasury companies and the ability for companies to put Bitcoin on their treasury balance sheets. That leads to not some concerns, but a trend where we see ownerships can be more and more concentrated in the hands of few, perhaps, corporations. And fundamentally, Bitcoin is about decentralizations and the fact that every citizen, every Bitcoiner is able to have Bitcoin in anywhere in the world, in the developed world, but also in developing countries. So what's your take on those trends of the treasury companies? And more generally, isn't there risks of concentration of ownership in Bitcoin with the rise of those treasury companies?
Right. So, I mean, I think that generally speaking, it's good that individuals get the first try, right? And that's the case. This is basically one of the very first times in history that the individual managed to front-run the smart money with access to private placements and VC, like early-stage deals, by a decade, right? So the individual has that opportunity and still has that opportunity, but we're now getting a bit later stage. And so, of course, sovereign wealth funds, public companies, like states in the US, individual states, and pension funds are starting to get in there because it's an economically rational thing to do in the same way that they allocate to gold or they allocate to other asset areas like mineral rights and forestry and things like that, right? So I think what you can do about it, it's a free market, is buy more Bitcoin yourself. Encourage the individual to buy Bitcoin, basically, right? That's one factor. And then the second thing is, I think, a lot of people are not professional investors, they're not amateur investors, invest in their own money. Their savings may be in their mortgage or in cash or in a mutual fund or something like that. But for people who are making their own investment decisions and thinking about the markets, effectively, the capital market is a huge part of human progress in the last hundreds of years. And it's, you could think about a company, you don't have to think about it as, a big gray corporation that is inscrutable and doing strange things. It's basically the idea of a company, which goes back hundreds of years, is just a group of humans with a shared incentive structure and interest to build products or services for the market. And as you can see, it's easily possible for a group of individuals to build something that an individual can't, particularly when you get to large engineering enterprises like Boeing and Airbus building billion-dollar products, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that the capital markets are a good thing. You can see what Michael Saylor, his thought process, because he was very transparent in articulating his thought process as he went through from zero, concerned about inflation at a corporate level, the same as an individual would be, trying to preserve the cash reserves of his company, to buying Bitcoin to protect that, and then realizing that there's some advantages of the capital market structure of a company in preferential access to capital that could be used productively with Bitcoin to increase Bitcoin per share and started the phenomena. So I think that that whole concept is a little bit counterintuitive to traditional finance, though there are some very big blue chip investors. For example, Capital Group is the biggest, I believe, investor in MicroStrategy, and also recently has become the biggest investor in Metaplanet, a Japanese analog, right? So you can see that some very savvy investors are starting to get it and really invest heavily in that sector. And it's sort of inherent that, Bitcoin's an asset class and we want all individuals to benefit from it, but investors will see the opportunity of the adoption and also invest in it. So, in the same way that the internet was really a tool for, it introduced a lot of liberties and changed the balance of power in the world in a positive way, there were still lots of venture capitalists and professional fund managers buying early internet stocks, right? So it's sort of inherent that as something grows and gets wider, gets higher tier, that you get more types of investors in it. The interesting question is, does Bitcoin continue to socially scale, and the incentive structure that worked in the early days translates and still works for them? And that so far has worked remarkably well.
I think there's definitely an ability for every individual to put Bitcoin on their portfolio through 401k for different assets that they already have. But there's this race against time where it seems like these treasury companies accumulate Bitcoin much faster than individuals could. And the more as an individual you wait, of course, presumably, the more it's going to be pricier to acquire Bitcoin. So there's a kind of a race, and it's great for the adoption of Bitcoin, but at the same time, as we mine fewer Bitcoins per year, this is a trend that is increasing, isn't it?
Well, I think it's an interesting thought exercise, because I remember some kind of economic, philosophical discussions on the cypherpunks list in probably the early 90s, where people were saying, some people get upset that a big company, long before Bitcoin, just about economics, and that a big company is too profitable or something, and making, cornering the market on something and making some common product expensive. And an interesting observation is, well, if you just buy the shares of the company, you can neutralize that cost because you receive the economic benefit of it, right? So I think one way to say that if the companies are too effective at accumulating Bitcoin, they have some structural advantage, compared to the amount of capital they put in to how many Bitcoin they can buy versus you, because they have cheaper loans, they have convertible notes, all these structures. The answer is you could avail yourself of it and just buy, a small pro rata share of it, and then you too can benefit from what they're doing if you're envious
That's
of it.
That's for
right?
public companies,
Yeah.
not for private companies.
Of course, yeah.
Yes, the ability to gain exposure of Bitcoin through those companies is also a solution. And I want to have your thoughts on the other trends that we see, especially here in America, of sovereign adoptions. Like we had Senator Loomis yesterday. What's your thought on the idea that nations buy Bitcoin and also acquire, also to fight inflations or the debt problems that they have?
It's maybe a similar situation. So, like, philosophically, as you were indicating, I would generally be happier that the individuals in the world own a big proportion of the Bitcoin. But there's only, and people who are enthusiastic about Bitcoin generally try to persuade their extended contacts about this. But there's a lot of people who don't understand, or, kind of inured by the current system and can't break out of it, right? Like in the Matrix analogy. So I think it would be preferable if there were more time for individuals to buy. And so I'm not actually personally in a rush to see governments buy, but, it is starting to happen. Like the pension funds, the sovereign wealth funds, a few in the Middle East, Abu Dhabi, and so on. The Swiss National Bank buying treasury stocks, and some of these big capital allocators buying treasury stocks or buying Bitcoin, some fund managers, and some, strategy funds that are listed. You can buy that have Bitcoin exposures. So it's become part of the investment landscape. And I think, there's an interesting phenomenon where if you're worried about making it expensive to build a position in Bitcoin, I think it's the case that the first sort of G20 level country to actually take the step of, making a significant purchase in Bitcoin or an over time transparent announcement that they're going to, there's a big first mover advantage. And so it's possible, if and when that happens, and the game theory seems to be pretty sound, that there is a first mover advantage, that it will change the playing field and make it a lot more expensive to buy Bitcoin. And I think I do like the the sort of underdog being first mover, because it's sort of like the individual being the first mover historically, or still today. It's still early, in my opinion. You see that, El Salvador, Bhutan, countries that are emerging market in terms of their GDP and infrastructure, make a big, bold bet on Bitcoin. I think, if El Salvador is able to assemble one of these billion-dollar bonds and put that into Bitcoin, give them a decade, depending on what happens with the adoption trajectory, that could place them on par in terms of sovereign wealth of Germany or something, right? So there's really an actual opportunity there for a first mover, even an emerging market country.
But that's a race against time for individuals, because as treasury companies accumulate Bitcoin and as sovereign states are in this game theoretic model where they're going to adopt Bitcoin, and they already do, then we don't want the individuals to be left out. So people need to buy Bitcoin now, because it's going to be more pricier very soon.
You can see it was quite surprising to me that MicroStrategy, I believe they started it a little over 5 years ago, that they were extremely vocal, that they were clearly winning versus other companies in terms of metric, size growth, earnings, share growth, and so on, for 5 years straight, while evangelizing to the world, to the public companies, to the individual, that you should buy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
And very few people listen to them. So, I think people have themselves to blame at this point, because, they just kind of slow motion won the kind of economic stakes while lecturing everybody about what they're doing and advocating for it. So, I think the individual has themselves to blame to listen. But I do think it will, as it's becoming more mainstream, a lot of people look to sort of other actors. So BlackRock entering the game. There's a lot of people from the financial sector that will trust something because BlackRock said it, even though somebody else said it 5 years before, but now BlackRock's saying the same thing, right? And so you get that phenomena. There's a lot of social cues that people draw their trust from. So I think that, can get people to dip a toe in. The access to ETFs that regularized it, the fact that the ETFs are provided by big trusted brands like Fidelity has their own ETF, BlackRock and so on, gives people who were unsure the confidence that it's a kind of implied recognition of the asset class by a trusted financial provider, effectively.
Yeah, so you're right. People sometimes have to be blamed, but I don't think people in this room have to be blamed to adopt Bitcoin and to be interested in Bitcoin. So thank you so much. And the answer is also educations and evangelizations of Bitcoin. So thank you so much, Adam, for this discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was fantastic.